the last 12 months, I've worked with about a dozen VA buyers as a realtor. And then I'm actually dual licensed, so I've worked with a couple dozen outside of Colorado and a couple of realtor partners here in Colorado Springs as a lender. So very well versed in the VA loan. I've been doing VA loans as the primary kind of product for my clients over the last about 35, 40 purchases. And yeah, very important that you get somebody who knows what they're doing, the specifics about the VA loan, because there are some differences that you kind of have to be aware of. So the nice thing about working with me is actually you end up with someone who is also a lender. You don't have to use me for both services. They are separate, but if nothing else, I bring kind of this extra expertise for the VA loan. I know how to work through certain appraisal issues that pop up that are specific to the VA loan. There's VA assumable loans, which having a lending background can be really helpful in targeting those and getting a pre-approval tailored specifically to the one you're going for. It's 4% concession rule. You go up to 6 for certain, costs that you can do on a VA loan. We talk about entitlement restoration. If you've used the VA loan in the past, we can go over occupancy rules. You got to occupy within 60 days. Sometimes there's exceptions. Just got one passed recently, actually. Multifamilies, you can go up to 4 units with a single veteran. With 2 veterans, you go up to 6 units. Talk about joint VA loans, house hacking. What does that look like? There's so many considerations. No, I don't just send you to a lender. If you're going to a state, let's say I'm going to get a referral for you to go somewhere where I can't serve as the lender, which I could lend in 29 states. But if you're outside of that reach, I will refer you to a lender, but they aren't just any lender. I'm going to make sure that they know exactly what they're doing. So you'll be in good hands. That's a great question. Around the 3-year mark is on average when you end up breaking even on the sale of a home. Every year you're paying down some of your loan, you're getting some appreciation. If you finance the VA funding fee, you've got to overcome essentially being underwater for the first part of your mortgage, plus, that 100% financing, kind of whittling that away. So if you're planning on selling after 2 years, I'd say probably not a good idea to buy unless you're planning to turn it into a rental when you leave. If you are planning on selling, making sure that the property you purchase is going to be a good rental, if you're going to keep it, or a good, appreciation play if you're going to try to sell it. Those considerations are important too. Think about your exit strategy. You're going to do a short-term rental, a mid-term rental, when you leave. All those things are important to think about if you're going to PCS in 2 to 4 years. Military tenants want to be close to the base, but oftentimes the neighborhood immediately right next to the base is not like the best neighborhood. So what I found is kind of there's a sweet spot where there's like this community feel, because that's what you sacrifice when you don't live on a base. On the base, there's events, there's the community sort of aspect. Kids are just running around in the streets, running to the park, and people feel like it's safer. So a community that mimics that, I think, outside of the base, where you get the benefits of lifestyle, but also you get the financial benefits of building equity and rentability when you leave it to PCS for the next assignment, like the wealth benefits of owning a home. I think that's where the sweet spot is. So finding those neighborhoods where there's maybe a community center, there's a place where people gather. I could list off a number of neighborhoods here in the Springs where those are definitely the case, but not too far away from whatever base that people are trying to get to. Like knowing the traffic patterns and what corridors are pretty heavy in the mornings and afternoons that's important too. Yeah, you don't want to find something that's quirky You want something where there's a lot of liquidity in like terms of people looking for it. So like a 3-bed, 2-bath, 4-bed, 2-bath, kind of a moderately sized home, I think would be good. Some of the more stable, already built neighborhoods. If you move into a new build neighborhood, if you try to sell after a couple of years when you PCS, and you're competing with other new builds that are still in the process of, coming to completion, that's not a great situation for you to be in. And there's also risk in a new build community where you don't know if that area is going to be in demand until it's fully built out and maybe the builder's on to the next filings. If you took the risk and all of a sudden the demand really isn't there for that part of town, then you're kind of in a bad situation. You want functional layouts, easy commutes, properties that are going to have lower maintenance, maybe in newer properties, not brand new, but newer, and then good school districts. Those are going to be places where I think you're going to have the best chance of at least decent appreciation. You're not going to like go down or stay too flat. I haven't seen too many people who I've helped buy move yet, just because I am a relatively younger agent. I've been selling homes for about 3 years now, maybe almost 4. But I have seen a couple of people sell. Also, the market over the last 3 or 4 years hasn't been the strongest. Appreciation's been relatively flat post-COVID after everything went crazy. So it hasn't been like a great option for people to sell their homes. People end up, not doing as well when the market is like that. In the long run, I think, buying real estate should be a long-term play. I think people are better off when they rent their homes out. And I have seen a number of people do that. But most of the people I've sold homes, at least so far, are still in those homes. I would look for a relatively low maintenance home, something that doesn't have the high-end finishes, is generally renter or tenant grade, is not the same as resale or something somebody's going to want to live in forever. Something that's got durable sort of flooring. You don't need your plush luxury carpet, like that's going to get destroyed by a pet. And do know that tenants can have pets and you can't stop them if they're considered emotional support animals. So that's something people get super easy online. I would probably look for places that are going to be decent appreciation properties, but also just underwriting the rents before you buy it. Like, what do other homes in this neighborhood or similar layouts, bedroom bathroom count, like what do they rent for in this area? And then try to get the rent to price ratio to be as high as you can get it. Generally more bedrooms, the better. And then close to military bases can get you more likely military tenant. So those are generally good tenants. That's a good question. It really does depend on your situation. I have counseled people to save their VA loan before if they want to use jumbo VA capability in the future. Because the moment you get a loan with the VA loan, you've now got a cap on how much total VA lending you can get with 0% down. And so if you're just going to live here for a couple of years, turn it into a rental, move, and then buy the forever home that you want to be like 1.2, 1.5, whatever $1 million. In that situation, I might say go save the VA loan. As if you're going to be getting out of the military and you're expecting to get at least 10% VA disability in the next couple of years, and when you're planning to make another purchase, your VA funding fee gets waived when you've got that. So paying a funding fee now versus not paying the funding fee when you're out of the military, that's a consideration. you got to think, how much down payment are you putting? You're going to try to minimize down payment. The lower you go in down payment, generally FHA conventional loans, you're going to have PMI, which you can avoid if you go VA. But if you're going 20% down, now that's not a consideration. You might have a higher rate with the conventional loan, but there's a funding fee on the VA loan. So, if you got no PMI, that's half the cost of the conventional loan. You really just have to look at the numbers and see for each situation, like what makes the most sense. Most of the time it is use the VA loan as soon as you can. But I will say there are definitely exceptions. The average American spends about 30% of their income on housing, whether that's rent or a mortgage payment. If you start pushing that and the property itself isn't going to be generating income like a multifamily property, you might start feeling house poor. It depends, like if you are dual income, you got no significant other expenses, maybe you can afford a little bit of a bigger house without feeling burdened, because generally like your gas to get to work, your insurance on the car, your food and other like line items in your budget are only so much. They're not going to increase it that much with your extra lifestyle. And so while those remain fixed and your income grows, you can afford to spend a higher percentage than 30% on your housing, and it's not that big of a deal. But if you're planning on, retiring your spouse, or they're going to just be out of the workforce for a little bit in the future, that 30% number now might look like, say, 60% after the spouse is retired. So you really just got to think like what your situation is going to be over the next few years as you own this property. I think people regret buying homes that are like just they were trying to keep their BAH and nothing more. And there was the perfect house. It was like $20,000 more, and would have been an extra $200 a month or whatever, and they didn't go for it because they were afraid of, busting just that super rigid line. And then they end up in a place that really isn't that great. Like it can go both ways. You can be house poor. You can also be just in not the right neighborhood because you were trying to be super rigid on the budget. So I think you should just weigh your options. There's pros and cons to everything. It depends if you're going to turn that house into a rental when you deploy or separate and move. Then like if the rents cover the mortgage, or at least is close, then that isn't such a big burden. But if you have a certain amount of fixed income coming in, or you're confident you can make a certain amount in employment, then you just kind of have to set that number for yourself. It's not everyone's got a different outlook on that. Some people are a little bit more willing to take on risk. Obviously the lower the loan, the lower the likelihood of you running into an issue down the road. So, which is why I advise people, if you're looking between 15 and 30-year mortgages, probably pick the 30-year. You get yourself a lot more pricing or like monthly payment flexibility, not being forced to make a payment. But yeah, really just depends on the person. VA, actually, just a couple weeks ago here in May, they came out with an easing of VA appraisal guidelines to make VA loans more competitive compared to conventional and FHA. In the past, I think some markets, they would discriminate against people coming with VA loans because people think, oh, well, the appraisal is going to turn up like chipping paint, or the railing doesn't have like the right end caps, or like, there's something wrong with the property that they're worried about the appraisal. Now that's not going to be as big of an issue. So I think VA buyers are more competitive now than they've ever been. But at the end of the day, it's supply and demand. Colorado Springs, we're a pretty balanced market right now. And so it kind of depends like how well the property is priced that you're going for or positioned in the market. Because if you're competing against an all cash buyer, yeah, a VA buyer, you're going to be, you know, taking the back seat to another offer. But yeah, just really depends on the market and know what you're competing with. Well, in Colorado, you've got expansive soils, and before a builder builds, they're supposed to dig up the soil or kind of test it, determine what are we building on here. Is this clay or sand or, you know, rock, you know, different kinds. And if it's not the right mixture, they will kind of take away some of the softer soil, add some of the harder soil in, mix it up until they test it and it hits the criteria they need. And that is supposed to keep the property from having foundation issues. But if you get a builder that didn't do it right, or let's say things just changed over time, it's been there for 100 years, the foundation can be very expensive if you need to repair that. I'm looking at one right across the street here. They ended up having an inspection report come back and the foundation's just a little bit slanted. They did a little more research and turns out they needed about $50,000 of repairs. So their lawn's all dug up and they've got, you know, these piers that they put in to help stabilize things. And yeah, that's not a fun one. Other things, you know, Colorado, you've got a lot of hail. So the roofs end up going out a little sooner than the average market. And those can be expensive. Got one up in Aurora right now where the hail is older than a year old, so we can't use insurance. Even if we did use insurance, it costs like a $14,000 deductible because deductibles have been going up, and they got to take solar panels off, put them back on. That's another like $6,000. So that's going to end up being like probably $21,000 repair. And seller wants it, or a buyer wants it done, you know. And if we want to sell the house, it's come up multiple times now. It has to be done. So, you know, foundation, roof, sewer lines can be pretty bad. I had one recently where thankfully my client took my recommendation to get a sewer scope done. It's a new build community. The house had only been there for about 3 years. But I knew this builder has had sewer issues in their previous builds. And we tested it. Sure enough, contractor cut corners and that there was a belly in the line, which means that the water's pooling. And we got the seller to dig it up and replace it. And the builder's warranty didn't do anything because they said, no, it's not part of, you know, what's in the warranty. So that ended up being another expensive one for that seller. You know, they probably bought thinking, well, there's not going to be any issues as a new build. And they probably didn't even test it. But if they had, they probably would have found the issue right away, gotten the builder to fix it. So that's another one, you know. So we got foundation, roof, sewer line, you know, HVAC systems, furnace and AC. My house, apparently the furnace was not built at a little bit of an angle where the water is supposed to drain out one side of the furnace. And so it's just been pooling, and there's a lot of like corrosiveness in that water. So it's been eating through this metal sheet. Now it's starting to drip onto parts of the furnace where you don't want it dripping. So that's going to be an expensive fix. All because, again, the builder built it wrong. They just put it level instead of canted. And the AC is supposed to also be canted. But the way that they built it, they're supposed to be canted in opposite directions because they put it in basically backwards. So neither of them are canted. So we got to replace also the AC unit. So these are things that just pop up when you own a home. You know, decent idea to get a home warranty, I think, when you make a purchase. But there's risks for sure to a lot of different like expensive components in a home. I just put one under contract, VA loan. You know, there's a 4% concession cap on VA loans, and I maxed them out. Got 4% concessions. You know, we're about to negotiate the inspection resolution. Probably going to get another 10, 15,000 there. So we'll be able to use that for rate buy down on top of the 4% rule. You know, people are willing to fix the big expensive things because they know that any buyer is going to want that fixed. You're not going to want to walk into, yay, zero down VA loan, concessions cover my closing costs, but then I have to pony up like, $10,000, $12,000 for a furnace replacement. That's not fun for a buyer who generally doesn't have the capital to have to do. So sellers who have the capital, because they're the ones with all the equity in the home, they're the ones who end up kind of eating that. Maybe gets baked into the purchase price or whatever. But let's see, what other things are people getting? 2-1, 1-1, 1-0 temporary rate buy downs. People are really liking those right now as rates feel relatively higher than they've been in the last few years with COVID rates. I've got some buyers that are trying to permanently buy their rate as far down as they can, just throw concessions at that. VA loan, I had one guy, he took about $32,000 of concessions, applied it towards debt payoff, which is unique to the VA loan, and that was a priority of his. So whatever you can think of for concessions, you can pretty much do it. Your commute is going to be important to you probably. A 12-hour day, you don't want to be driving 30, 45 minutes each way to home and back. At that point, your home is pretty much just the place you sleep. Maybe you don't have time to go to the gym, so maybe you want a home gym, or you're in like one of those communities that have got a gym that might be important to you. You probably don't want a high maintenance yard because you're not going to have the time to mow it, and then you're just going to have to hire somebody to do it, and then you're never going to enjoy it. So you're just spending money for no reason. If you do get a yard and there's an HOA and they're kind of on you for maintaining it, that could be a hassle too. So maybe avoid HOAs with difficult rules. Yeah, those would probably be the things I would think about. Young officers generally want to be close to amenities, things that they can do, maybe even walkable. I know this community that's close to Interquest, which is one of the big roads out here, and they have really enjoyed being close to all those restaurants and bars and that kind of thing. I've got folks who want to be closer to downtown Colorado Springs or old Colorado Springs, old Colorado City. Those homes are generally a bit older, but if you're kind of using it as just a launching pad to be out all night, it doesn't really matter as much. Those are areas that in general I've appreciated pretty well. So, they might be a little more expensive to get in just because of the location, but real estate's all about location, location, location. You can't change that. So maybe down the road you can upgrade the house, but those are generally the lifestyle fits that I've seen. I think junior officers can either try to live too far away from the base. They underestimate how impactful a long commute is going to be because they've never had to commute. They come maybe out of college and they've been in the dorms, they've walked to class, and all of a sudden, they see a pretty house on Zillow. They're like, ooh, it's pretty, but it's out in the middle of nowhere. And they buy it, and then they're not near their friends. And maybe they're in a community that doesn't fit their lifestyle, lots of bigger families, or it's just like too far out there. I think that can definitely be a pitfall I've seen junior officers fall into. Not considering multiple exit strategies. So junior military officer who buys a house that they plan to rent out the rooms, and the numbers only work if they rent out the rooms. Like, they're house poor if they don't. And then they realize, I don't want to have roommates. Like, I'm happy being alone, and now I've got 5-bedroom house because I was trying to max that out for my plans, and I either can't find the tenants because I'm not aggressively searching. I'm not hiring someone to help me with it because I don't have the bandwidth to manage the manager, or they just don't want to. I've found that can kind of hurt a junior military officer as well. or not thinking about the resale. You know, you buy into one of those communities that's out in the middle of nowhere, that's new build community. The appraisals are all kind of incestuous. They just use the previous builder's build. And then when the community's done being built, you know, $40,000 of rate buy down that's been baked into the purchase price is no longer being offered by the young military officers trying to sell his house. And if it were, the purchase price might be supported at a certain level, but you know, he's not offering that. So because he doesn't have that kind of equity, because the appraisal wasn't, you know, legitimately where it should have been, in my opinion. You know, that could be an issue too. Absolutely. You know, I used to think buying was for everyone. I realized that's not the case. And also, not every home is for every buyer. There's, for your goals, maybe the right fit and the wrong fit. And you know, if I know you're someone who likes new and shiny, and we go see something in Old Colorado City that's existed for 120 years, I probably know before we even go see it, you're not gonna like it. You may or may not listen to me, but you know, when we go see it, I might tell you like I don't think you're gonna like the way that the floors are like Dr. Sears style wonky. So yeah, I'll absolutely tell you if I think it's a bad idea. If it's too far away, I think people come to Colorado for the mountains, and a lot of the new developments are coming in on the very far east side of town. I just don't think the appreciation is going to be there. Like, you can maybe buy more house because the location isn't as great, but I think down the road, it's just a lot of cookie cutter, you know, kind of thrown up as quick as they can. You know, it depends on the builder, but you know, it's out in the plains. Like, I don't think people want to live there. So I would avoid buying something like that. I'd avoid buying something that's got some crazy high HOA, you know, that is not going to relate to, you know, higher rental demand. It just doesn't get the one for one in terms of like your cost and the benefit. And then probably avoid properties that are like that have a lot of deferred maintenance. I think those you can overlook in your head because everything else seems great about the property, like the purchase price or whatever. But you know, the purchase price might be a little lower because you're going to end up having to replace the roof, the furnace, the AC, you know, and the foundation's kind of in a like a monitor kind of state. And then maybe 10 years down the road, you're like, okay, now it's no longer monitor. It's like you need to do something about it. I don't think those are properties you want to go for. I'd buy something that either has the right zoning to do a short-term rental when you leave, a non-owner occupied short-term rental, or fourplex, you know, multifamily, max out your VA entitlement, like 0 down. You get great rates. You can rent units while you're living there. So then you're saving money while building equity and getting cash flow that every year improves because you can raise the rents. And then when you move, you just do it again. If you're like a single person with no kids, that's 100% what I would do, buy a fourplex. A smart ESOP grad buyer will buy, first of all. I think homeowners are 40 times wealthier than renters for a reason. I think, you know, by the time you're a lieutenant colonel, full bird, you're gonna be, you know, still owning, and you've owned for maybe 20 years. Not how much equity have you rolled from property to property, or, you know, maybe how big of a portfolio have you built by then? Like, it's a fantastic retirement plan. Just be mindful of your cash flow situation. Like, if you're buying places that are like nicer than average in the city that you're moving to, generally the places that perform best as a rental are just slightly below average in the city in terms of price point. So if you're buying above, now the rents may not make as much sense compared to the purchase price. It might be a little bit negative cash flow, which isn't the end of the world for one property, But after 4 or 5, now you might be paying quite a bit just to hold the portfolio, which isn't really a super fun position to be in. So I think they use their VA loan intelligently to buy, property after property, but make sure that they're buying properties that make sense for their exit strategy, whether it's a sale, get high appreciation for the sale, or keep as a rental, then you buy a different type of property.